Welcome to our episode of English is Easy, where we'll have a deep and enjoyable conversation about how to improve listening skills in English. And the great thing is that by simply listening to us speak in long, natural sentences, you're already doing one of the most effective things to build your listening power, because your brain is getting used to the rhythm, the vocabulary, the patterns of real conversation, and the feeling of English in its true spoken form, not just in textbooks.
Thanks for having me today, Emma. I'm really excited to talk about this topic because I think a lot of learners, including me, struggle with listening even after studying English for years, and we often ask ourselves questions like why can't I understand movies without subtitles, or why do native speakers talk so fast, and that frustration sometimes makes us lose motivation. But I believe if we learn the right methods and keep practicing in fun ways, we can really improve and start enjoying English much more than we ever thought possible.
You're absolutely right, Liam, because listening is not just a skill we're born with, it's something we train, just like learning to play an instrument or a sport. And when you understand that your brain needs regular exposure to natural English, with repetition, variety, and real interaction, then you stop blaming yourself and start seeing listening as a journey where every podcast, every conversation, every video, and every little effort you make is actually helping you get better without you even noticing.
That makes a lot of sense, and one thing I've noticed is that when I listen to the same audio more than once, like a podcast or a video clip, the first time I maybe only catch 40% of what's being said, but then the second or third time I suddenly start hearing more details, understanding more words, and recognizing expressions that I didn't catch before. So I think repetition is one of the secret tools that many learners forget to use, but it really works, especially when you enjoy the content and don't mind hearing it again.
Exactly, Liam. Repetition with interest is key, because the brain learns best when it's relaxed and enjoying what it's doing. So if you find podcasts, interviews, stories, or songs that you like, don't be afraid to listen to them again and again. And even better, try to speak along with the speaker, pause and repeat tricky parts, and notice the way their voice goes up or down, how they link words together, and how some sounds disappear or change, because those details are what make real English sounds so different from how it looks in writing.
I've tried that with music sometimes, like listening to English songs and reading the lyrics at the same time, and it really helped me understand how native speakers play with sounds, and how sometimes they don't pronounce every word clearly, but instead connect everything smoothly, and that used to confuse me a lot because I was looking for clear, separate words, but now I'm learning that English is more about rhythm and flow, and if I can follow that rhythm, I can guess the words even if I don't hear every sound perfectly.
You've just described one of the biggest breakthroughs in listening, realizing that you don't need to hear every single word or sound to understand the message, because native speakers also don't focus on every word when they listen. They focus on meaning, emotion, and context. So the more you train yourself to relax, to listen for ideas instead of individual words, and to use background knowledge and intuition to fill in the blanks, the more confident you'll feel when watching shows, talking to people, or listening to audio in real time.
That reminds me of something I read once, that listening is an active skill, not a passive one, which means you have to be mentally engaged, thinking about what the speaker is trying to say, predicting what might come next, and not just letting the words pass through your ears like background noise. And I think that's what I need to work on, because sometimes I listen with my ears but not with my brain, and that's when I realize I didn't understand anything even though I was technically listening.
That's a fantastic point, Liam, because true listening requires focus and curiosity. And one way to build that mental engagement is to ask yourself questions while listening, like what is this person trying to say, what is their mood? What example did they just give? And even if you don't get the answers perfectly at first, the habit of listening actively will push your brain to work harder, remember more, and become more comfortable with the natural speed and style of real spoken English.
I've also started doing something interesting recently, which is watching videos in English with the subtitles turned on at first, then watching again without subtitles to see how much I remember or understand. And I noticed that doing this not only improves my vocabulary, but also trains my ears to hear the sounds and rhythm of the words I saw on the screen before, and after a while, I can even hear those words in other videos or conversations, which feels really exciting because I know I'm making progress.
That's one of the smartest techniques out there, Liam. And what's great is that you're turning listening into a game or a challenge instead of a boring task. And when you combine reading and listening like that, your brain creates stronger memory links between the words, their sounds, their meanings, and their usage, and those connections make it easier for you to recognize the words the next time you hear them, and eventually, you won't need subtitles at all, you'll just understand with your ears and your intuition.
Another thing I've noticed is that I understand English much better when the speaker is clear and slow, but I get completely lost when the person has an accent I'm not used to, or speaks quickly with a lot of slang or emotion, and that can feel discouraging because I start to think that I'm not good at English. But maybe it's more about getting used to different styles of speech and not expecting everyone to sound like the people in the textbooks or English learning videos.
You're absolutely right again, Liam, and that's why it's important to expose yourself to a variety of accents, speeds, emotions, and speaking styles, because English is spoken differently all over the world. And the more comfortable you get with those differences, the more flexible and skilled you become as a listener. So I recommend listening to speakers from different regions, watching interviews, listening to real-life conversations, and sometimes even watching the same video spoken by different people to notice how speech changes from person to person.
That's something I've started doing with YouTube, following channels from people in the UK, the US, Australia, and even India or Africa, where English is used every day but with different accents, and although it's hard at first, it's also really fun and interesting to see how much I can understand, and I also learn a lot about culture, daily life, and new vocabulary that I wouldn't find in a classroom or a traditional English textbook.
That's exactly the kind of learning that sticks with you, Liam, because when you connect language to real life and real people, your brain remembers more, and your motivation stays higher. So if you keep exploring the world of English through stories, music, news, documentaries, and even comedy or food videos, you'll find yourself learning without feeling like you're studying, and over time, your listening skills will grow naturally just by being part of that world.
I'm really starting to see that listening practice is more than just sitting with my headphones on and playing something in the background. It's actually a full experience where I can challenge myself, repeat what I hear, read transcripts, pause and rewind, and even write down interesting expressions or slang so that I not only improve my comprehension but also pick up natural vocabulary I can use in my own speaking one day.
That's such a smart approach, Liam, because when you combine listening with writing, speaking, and even reading, you create a full language experience that stimulates different parts of your brain, and it helps the words and phrases you hear to really stay in your long-term memory, especially when you start noticing how certain phrases come up again and again in different contexts, like "you know what I mean," "kind of," "actually," or "let me tell you," which are common in real speech but often missing from textbooks.
Yeah, I've definitely started to notice those repeated phrases, and at first I didn't understand their purpose, because they didn't really change the meaning of the sentence, but then I realized they're part of what makes English sound friendly and natural, and understanding them helps me follow the flow of a conversation even if I miss some of the more important vocabulary, and they also give me time to catch my breath and think when I use them in speaking.
That's a great insight, Liam, and those little filler phrases are actually really important for both understanding and fluency, because they signal the speaker's emotion, their intention, or the structure of their thoughts. And if you can learn to hear them and even use them in your own speaking, you'll sound much more natural and connected to the rhythm of English, and your listening will improve too, because you'll start recognizing these signal words that guide you through the conversation.
I guess listening is like putting together a puzzle. You don't always need every piece to see the picture, but the more pieces you collect, the clearer everything becomes. And every time I listen to a new podcast or a video, I'm collecting more pieces, especially when I hear something I already know used in a new way, or when I suddenly understand a joke or an idiom that used to confuse me completely.
What a beautiful way to describe it, Liam, because listening really is like assembling a mental puzzle, and at first it feels overwhelming with all the unknown pieces, but as you grow, you start recognizing the edges, the colors, and the patterns, and your brain becomes faster at putting it all together, especially when you expose yourself to lots of different topics, speakers, and situations, because that diversity is what gives you the pieces you need to become a confident and competent listener.
One of my favorite ways to practice lately has been to choose one podcast episode every week and listen to it deeply, not just once, but several times, and I try different things each time. I might listen just for the main ideas the first time, then the second time I pause after every sentence to repeat what I heard, then the third time I check the transcript or subtitle to find any words I missed, and that deep practice makes me feel like I'm really learning instead of just passively listening.
That's such a powerful technique, Liam, because deep listening, where you really focus on one piece of audio and explore it from different angles, helps your brain build solid, lasting understanding, and the more you train that skill, the easier it becomes to understand new materials faster in the future. Just like an athlete who trains certain muscles over and over until they become strong and ready for anything.
Another thing I've learned is not to be afraid of difficult audio, because before I would only choose beginner-level podcasts or videos where people speak slowly, but now I try to listen to more advanced material even if I don't understand everything, because just by hearing the natural rhythm and real-life speed, I start getting used to how English sounds in the real world, and that gives me more confidence when I talk to native speakers or listen to fast conversations.
You're absolutely right, Liam, and challenging yourself with difficult material is like going to the gym and lifting slightly heavier weights. You might not succeed completely at first, but your brain gets stronger and better at processing fast, complex English. And even if you only understand 30 or 40%, that's still valuable exposure, and little by little your understanding grows without you realizing it, especially if you stay consistent and keep listening every day.
I've also found that keeping a listening journal helps me a lot. I write down what I listened to, how much I understood, what new phrases I heard, and any parts one found difficult, and over time I can see my progress and also notice patterns in what I need to work on, and that kind of reflection keeps me motivated and reminds me that listening is not just about hearing sounds, it's about learning how to listen better each time.
That's an amazing habit, Liam, and reflective learning like that helps you become more aware of your strengths and weaknesses, and by tracking your progress, you also train your brain to notice more during the listening process, which boosts both your comprehension and your confidence, because you're no longer just hoping you'll get better, you're actively measuring your growth and taking control of your learning journey.
I've noticed that some days I feel like I understand everything really well, and then other days I struggle with the same type of audio, which used to make me feel frustrated or like I was going backward, but now I understand that listening is like any skill, it has ups and downs. And just like with learning to play music or ride a bike, some days you're in the zone and everything works, while other days you need to be patient with yourself and know that progress is still happening quietly in the background.
That's such a wise observation, Liam, because language learning is not a straight line but a journey with waves and turns, and our brain needs time to process, organize, and absorb all the new sounds and information it receives. And the important thing is not to get discouraged by the bad days but to see them as a normal part of the learning curve, and even on days when you feel like you're not learning much, your brain is still working behind the scenes to reinforce past knowledge and prepare you for future growth.
I try to remind myself of that when I feel stuck, and I also learned that it's okay to take short breaks and come back to the same material later with fresh ears, because sometimes I listen to a podcast in the morning and find it hard to follow. But then later in the day I try again and suddenly things make more sense, and that shows me how rest, mood, and energy also affect how well I can listen and process new English input.
Absolutely, Liam, because listening isn't just about the ears, it's also about your mind, your attention, and your emotional state. So if you're tired, distracted, or stressed, even native speakers can struggle to understand someone clearly. And that's why it's important to be kind to yourself, set realistic expectations, and create a listening routine that fits into your life in a way that feels enjoyable and not like pressure or punishment.
Another thing that helped me was learning about connected speech, how in English, words often link together and change sounds when spoken naturally, and that used to confuse me so much, like when someone says gonna instead of going to, or wanna instead of want to, and I thought they were speaking incorrectly, but now I realize that's just how fluent, everyday English sounds, and if I don't learn to understand those shortcuts, I'll miss a lot of what's being said.
Yes, connected speech is one of the biggest hurdles for English learners, because in writing everything is clear and separated, but in real life, speakers blend words, reduce sounds, drop syllables, and even skip letters, and it can feel like they're speaking a completely different language. But once you start listening for those patterns, like how did you becomes didja or what are you doing becomes whatcha doin', you'll realize that native speakers aren't trying to be difficult, they're just speaking quickly and comfortably, like we all do in our native tongues.
I like to watch short clips and focus on just one sentence at a time to notice those changes, and I write it down the way I hear it, not the way it's written in subtitles, and that helps me understand what I'm really hearing, and then I compare it to the actual sentence to see how much was reduced or connected, and doing that has trained my ear to pick up on those hidden sounds that I used to miss completely.
That's an incredibly effective technique, Liam, and by doing that you're teaching your brain to map real speech onto the standard grammar you've already learned, and the more you listen with intention and curiosity, the more natural those reduced forms will sound to you, and soon you'll be able to understand them without needing to slow down the audio or read subtitles, and even better, your own speech will start to sound more fluent and native-like as you begin to use those same patterns.
I've also realized that listening is not something you master once and then forget, it's something you keep working on even as you become more advanced, because there will always be new words, new topics, or new voices that challenge your ear, and I think that's actually exciting, because it means listening can always be fresh and interesting, and it's not just a skill to check off your list, it's part of how you grow and stay connected to the language.
That's such a great mindset, Liam, because language is always alive and changing, and even native speakers learn new expressions and adapt to different accents all the time. So as long as you keep listening, exploring, and enjoying the process, your skills will keep growing too, and you'll reach a point where understanding English is not something you fear or avoid, it becomes a joyful habit that brings you closer to people, ideas, cultures, and experiences you never had access to before.
I've started to notice that too, how listening opens up the world to me in new ways, like being able to follow global news, understand interviews with artists or scientists, laugh at jokes in TV shows, or connect with people from different countries, and even if I don't speak perfectly yet, just being able to listen and understand others makes me feel included, connected, and more confident in my ability to grow as an English speaker.
And that's one of the most beautiful outcomes of strong listening skills, Liam, not just understanding the language, but understanding the people who speak it, the emotions behind their words, the culture hidden in their tone and rhythm. And once you develop that ear, you'll realize that listening is not just a tool for learning, it's a bridge to the world, to empathy, and to deep, meaningful communication with others.
Something else I've been thinking about is how important it is to choose listening materials that match my interests, because I used to force myself to listen to news or technical talks just because I thought they were useful, but I realized I was getting bored and distracted, so now I focus on things I enjoy like travel videos, personal vlogs, comedy podcasts, and even English storytelling channels, and when I'm interested, I forget I'm studying and just enjoy the experience while learning. Naturally at the same time.
That's such an important discovery, Liam, because interest and curiosity are powerful motivators, and when you choose topics you care about, your brain becomes more alert, more active, and more likely to remember what it hears, and the emotional connection you feel while listening, whether it's laughter, excitement, or even suspense, helps the vocabulary and patterns stick in your memory much more deeply than if you're just listening out of obligation or routine.
I've noticed that when I listen to a story or a personal conversation, I can usually follow along more easily, even if I don't know every word, because the speaker's emotions, tone, and the situation help me guess the meaning, and that makes me feel more confident in my listening skills, because I'm starting to trust my intuition and understanding more, instead of always trying to translate or look up words right away.
And that's exactly what we want to develop in advanced listening, the ability to use context, voice tone, and background knowledge to understand what's being said without relying on translation or dictionary help all the time. And it's like learning to dance. Instead of counting every step, you begin to move with the language naturally, responding to its rhythm and flow, and that's when listening becomes not just easier but truly enjoyable.
I've even started to pay more attention to the emotions in people's voices when I listen to interviews or YouTube videos, because sometimes even if I don't understand the words clearly, I can still tell if someone is excited, sad, nervous, or joking, and that makes me feel like I'm connecting to their message on a deeper level, which motivates me to listen more and to be more curious about the culture and feelings behind the language.
You're developing something really special, Liam, that emotional listening skill that goes beyond words and connects you to meaning through tone, pacing, hesitation, and expression. And that's a powerful tool not only for understanding language but for becoming a better communicator and listener in general. Because when you can hear someone's emotion as well as their words, you build more empathy, more connection, and a richer understanding of the people around you.
I also try to imitate those emotions when I practice speaking, because if someone says something with surprise or sadness, I try to say it the same way, and it helps me feel like I'm not just repeating English but actually performing it, almost like an actor, and I think that makes me more aware of how emotions and pronunciation work together in real conversations.
That's a fantastic strategy, Liam, and performing English like an actor is one of the best ways to internalize the sound and emotion of the language, because actors don't just say lines, they live them, and by copying their rhythm, pauses, expressions, and intonation, you're training your ear and your mouth to work together, which sharpens your listening and speaking at the same time in a very natural and expressive way.
I've been using clips from movies or shows and practicing the same sentence over and over until I can say it just like the actor, and even though it's challenging, it's really satisfying when I finally match the tone or emotion correctly, and later when I hear someone say a similar phrase in real life or another show, it's easier to understand because my brain already recognizes the sound pattern and the feeling behind it.
That kind of deep listening and imitation is how you move from passive understanding to active fluency, Liam. And it shows how much progress you've made by not just hearing English but really feeling it and using it. And when you can feel the meaning in your voice, your brain locks it in, and suddenly listening is no longer a puzzle, it becomes a familiar rhythm that you can follow effortlessly.
I used to think that listening was just about the ears, but now I understand it's about attention, memory, emotion, and imagination too. And it feels like I've opened a new world where every voice, every conversation, and every audio clip has something new to teach me, not just about the English language but about the people who speak it and the cultures they come from.
That's such a beautiful way to put it, Liam, because the goal of listening practice isn't just to understand words but to connect with people and their ideas. And when you treat every listening session as a chance to enter someone's story, someone's mind, or someone's world, you'll find yourself growing in ways that go far beyond grammar or vocabulary. You'll grow as a listener, a learner, and a person.
One of the most surprising things I've learned recently is that even when I don't fully understand everything the first time, just hearing English every day, whether I'm doing the dishes, walking outside, or relaxing, has a quiet, invisible effect on my brain, and over time I've noticed that my ears start to wake up and catch phrases or patterns that used to fly over my head. And that's made me believe that daily listening is more powerful than I ever thought, even when it doesn't feel like traditional studying.
That's such an important realization, Liam, because consistent exposure is one of the most powerful ingredients in language learning. And while focused study is important too, simply surrounding yourself with the sounds of English on a regular basis, whether through podcasts, videos, music, or background conversations, allows your subconscious brain to absorb patterns, rhythm, pronunciation, and structure in a way that formal lessons alone can't always achieve, and that kind of invisible practice builds strong listening reflexes over time.
I think one of the reasons learners give up on listening practice is that they expect fast results, and when they don't see big improvement after a few videos or podcasts, they get discouraged and think they're not talented. But what I've learned is that improvement in listening is quiet and slow at first, like learning to understand a new accent. And sometimes you don't even notice your progress until one day you listen to something you couldn't understand a month ago and suddenly it feels easy.
That's a perfect description, Liam, because listening progress often hides in the background until suddenly something clicks, and you realize your brain has been working hard all along, organizing sounds, linking words, predicting meaning, and adjusting to new speech patterns, and those small, quiet victories slowly build up to something powerful. So learners who are patient and keep listening every day, even if only for 10 or 15 minutes, will wake up one day to discover they understand much more than they thought.
I've been thinking a lot about patience, especially because we live in a world that moves fast and expects instant results, but listening, like learning any real skill, requires time, care, repetition, and a calm mind, and I've learned that it's okay to slow down, to listen again, to not understand everything right away, and to trust the process, because that trust allows me to stay relaxed and open to learning, instead of feeling nervous or rushed during every practice session.
That mindset is truly the heart of language learning, Liam, because the learners who succeed in the long run are not necessarily the ones with the best memory or the most perfect grammar, but the ones who stay curious, patient, and emotionally connected to the language. And when you give yourself permission to enjoy the learning process instead of forcing it, your brain becomes more creative, your ears become sharper, and your ability to understand spoken English grows in a strong and lasting way.
I've also noticed that the more I understand spoken English, the more confident I become in conversations, because before I would only focus on what I wanted to say and worry about how to form correct sentences, but now I realize that real communication is just as much about listening well, and when I understand the other person clearly, I feel more relaxed, more present, and better able to respond naturally without panic or fear of mistakes.
That's a wonderful shift, Liam, because good communication is always a two-way experience, and strong listening skills not only help you understand others, they also help you build trust, connection, and empathy in conversations, and the better you listen, the more deeply you engage, and the more fluently your responses come, because your brain has time to process the language in context and create meaningful replies instead of trying to invent perfect grammar under pressure.
I also love that listening can be so flexible. I can do it while walking, cooking, cleaning, or even just lying in bed, and that makes it easier to stay consistent without feeling like I need to sit at a desk or follow a strict schedule, and that kind of freedom makes listening practice feel more like a part of my lifestyle instead of a boring task I have to force myself to do.
Yes, and that's one of the biggest advantages of listening. It fits into your life in so many creative and relaxing ways, and you can listen passively during daily routines or practice more actively with headphones, transcripts, or shadowing exercises. And either way, you're building your English ability step by step, especially if you choose content that matches your interests, your goals, and your mood each day.
I think the best part is that there's no limit to what I can listen to. Once I have the basic skills, I can explore so many topics like science, travel, psychology, cooking, storytelling, or even comedy, and every new voice I hear helps me not only become a better listener but also learn something new about the world, and that makes the whole experience so rich, exciting, and motivating.
That's one of the greatest gifts of strong listening skills. You gain access to a universe of knowledge, culture, emotion, and creativity that would be locked away without the ability to understand spoken English. And whether it's a TED Talk, a personal podcast, a stand-up routine, or an inspiring interview, every voice you hear adds a new color to your world and strengthens your connection to global conversations.
Looking back at how far I've come in just a few months, I can say that listening used to be the skill I feared the most, but now it's becoming one of the skills I actually enjoy, because I no longer feel helpless when I hear fast English. I've learned how to stay calm, focus on the message, let go of the need for perfection, and most importantly, believe that every minute of listening is building something inside me, even if I don't see the results right away on the surface.
That's exactly how lasting progress feels, Liam. Quiet, steady, invisible at first, but incredibly powerful over time. And the fact that you've gone from fear to enjoyment shows how much your mindset and habits have evolved, because you no longer see listening as something to solve like a test, but as something to grow into, experience by experience, breath by breath, until one day the sounds that once confused you become as familiar and comfortable as your native language.
And I think that's what makes learning English feel more personal now, because I'm no longer just doing it for a test or a job requirement, but because I want to understand real people, stories, emotions, and perspectives that I could never access before, and listening gives me that door, that secret pass into other lives, other cultures, and even other ways of thinking, and it's made me not only a better English learner but also a more open, thoughtful, and curious person.
That's one of the most beautiful things about mastering a listening skill. It doesn't just improve your English, it also deepens your human experience. Because language is not just vocabulary or grammar, it's connection, it's trust, it's laughter, it's shared silence, it's the little moments of meaning between people, and when you understand someone's voice, their story, and their feelings, you understand more than words, you understand their world.
That's exactly how I feel now when I watch a good podcast, a story, or even a simple conversation between friends on YouTube. I listen not just to the English, but to the people behind the English, and I realize that every voice I hear makes me stronger, every laugh I understand brings me joy, and every sentence I follow makes me more confident that I'm not just studying a language anymore, I'm actually becoming part of it.
And that's what every learner should know, Liam, that listening is not just a step in the learning process, it is the heart of fluency, the foundation of understanding, and the tool that transforms you from a learner into a communicator. And even if your grammar isn't perfect or your accent isn't native-like, when you can truly listen, you'll never be lost in a conversation, because your ears and your heart will always guide you.
So if someone asked me now what's the best way to improve their English listening, I wouldn't say take a course or memorize lists. I would say listen every day, listen with feeling, and listen without fear, because that's what really changed things for me. Not doing perfect practice, but doing real practice with curiosity, love for the language, and the belief that understanding comes with time, effort, and patience.
And I would add that you don't need to understand everything perfectly right now. you just need to keep showing up, keep your ears open, keep your heart soft, and trust that every voice you hear is shaping your ability, expanding your brain, and strengthening your listening skills bit by bit. And if you stay on this path and listen deeply every day, one day you'll wake up and realize you don't need subtitles anymore, because your ears have become fluent.
That's exactly the dream, isn't it? To one day sit down with a movie, a friend, a podcast, or even a stranger, and just listen without fear, without guessing, without struggling to feel at home in the sound of English, and to know that I've earned that feeling by listening, learning, and growing little by little, sentence by sentence, for weeks, months, maybe even years, but never giving up, never stopping, and always believing in myself.
That's the dream, Liam, and it's also your reality now, because the confidence in your voice, the calm in your tone, and the insight in your words show me that you're already there. You've made listening part of who you are, and that's the real definition of fluency. Not perfection, but presence, not knowing everything, but understanding enough to keep going, to keep listening, and to keep connecting with people through the power of English.
I want to thank you, Emma, not just for helping me learn, but for making me feel like listening is not something I'm bad at, but something I can grow into, enjoy, and even love. And I hope everyone who's listening today walks away with the same feeling, that they don't need to be afraid of fast speech, difficult accents, or missed words, because if they just keep listening, everything will come together in time.
And I want to thank you too, Liam, for being such an honest, thoughtful, and inspiring learner, because your journey reminds all of us that the path to understanding is not about speed or skill, but about dedication, kindness to ourselves, and the willingness to keep listening, even when it's hard, even when it's confusing, because that listening, day after day, is what turns effort into confidence and practice into fluency.
So to everyone out there who's learning English and working on their listening, I just want to say don't give up, because your brain is learning more than you know, your ears are stronger than you think, and the more you listen, the more you'll understand, until one day you'll realize you didn't just learn English, you lived it.
And on that beautiful note, we'll say goodbye for now, but remember, listening is not something you do only when studying, it's something you can enjoy every single day, whether through stories, conversations, songs, or silence. So keep your headphones close, your heart open, and never stop listening, because the more you listen, the more English will become a part of you.